Okay, ready? Welcome to the Jesus Said Love podcast.
Season 4, and we have some big announcements.
The podcast started as an extension of our work and ministry with survivors of sexual exploitation and trafficking. However, these conversations exposed a broader cultural issue impacting Christ followers.
So starting in Season 4, this podcast will attempt to explore the big question: how do we live and love like Jesus today?
We are moving the podcast under the religion and spirituality category to explore the wide context of Christ following. So please share this show with others.
In this podcast, we will give space for conversation, compassion, and courage as we seek to love God and love our neighbor.
Lastly, we're looking to grow our support as there has been no budget for this podcast. So if you listen to the show, would you consider supporting us even at $5 a month by going to JesusSaidLovePodcast.com.
Supporters will get bonus content and savings on resources like books, products, and conferences, and raw live video footage of the recording.
So how do we live and love like Jesus?
Let's find out.
Thanks for letting me come say hello.
Well, it's so good to see you, and just thank you for what you invested in me all the 20 years ago. Psalms, that was my favorate class. Psalms and the wisdom literature. So there you go, Dr. O.
What a heart moment. And thanks for taking good care of Shannon.
We're going to try. We won't throw her to the wolves yet.
Okay. See y'all later.
See ya.
Bye, Dr. Brown. That is so great. How wild. That is just next level, Brett.
It's so bizarre.
It is.
I mean, I'm used to people knowing him, but usually not in this context.
He was so cool for me because I was taking that class with him and I was just starting to lead worship at Choice. And so he kind of was pivotal in walking me through that, how to maintain sobriety while you're put in front of 2,000 kids as an 18-year-old. So he wouldn't remember. He probably didn't even remember me at all. But anyway,
if you've messaged him on Facebook, he probably does. But
so awesome.
So funny. He was like, I gotta find my hat. I look terrible. Nobody cares. You're a 70-year-old man. Nobody cares.
That's the beauty of retirement. You can wear whatever the hell you want.
That's right. Oh my gosh. So great. I love it. Well, okay. So that's the connection. I could not remember, Waco and Baylor and stuff. I just could not remember if it was Dallas for some reason. I don't know. But no, it's Baylor.
We were in the Dallas area for a couple of years. My husband did his master's at UNT, so we were there for a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
so
we're recording, so let's go ahead and get started and see what other kind of surprises are going to pop up on us.
You know it.
Right.
We'll do like a little...
Where are y'all at? Y'all are in
Iowa. Yeah, they moved here 2 years ago to help with the kids when he retired.
That's amazing. So we'll do a little intro and then just go for it. It's really what we do. We just want this to be authentic. We want it to give people freedom. If we have time for just a guided meditation at the end for people who are listening, I'll remind people not to close their eyes if they're driving before you do the meditation. And and so we'll see what happens.
Is there anything off limits for you?
No, I mean, I don't talk too much in detail about my kids, but I mean, I can talk about them, but not, especially the one who's adopted. Sometimes people ask like adoption details, so I don't really do that, but I didn't figure you guys were going to go in that direction anyway.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions just about the book, and I just want you to even expound on some of I haven't totally finished it yet, which is my fault, but
that's fine.
But I have a lot of questions just even about the layout and the content and breaking down some of these like big themes. So I think it'll be good.
Yay.
Okay, Brett, you want to kick us? Oh, we're married, by the way. Somebody asked, is that the last? Okay, good. All right.
In the text exchange.
Okay. Okay. So you're going to start, Brett?
I'm trying to. You're just interrupting me.
Oh, that was a start?
Yeah. Will you stop doing that?
Sure.
We've already started. See how we do?
Go for it.
This is how we do. No, we're already started. That was the start.
I thought you were holding your breath.
I was, because I wanted to see what you would do, because you could not maintain in your oneness, you could not maintain the intentional silence that I brought to the table. You had to make sure that I was going to say hello. My choosing in the moment was to not say hello and see what happened. This is what happened.
Yeah, well, you can't control me. I mean, your eightness can't control
I know,
me.
but you were trying to control me in your judgmental oneness.
I don't think I was.
Of my quiet space that I was intentionally delivering in this opening monologue.
You're a lot, babe.
I'm trying to keep you on your toes, babe.
You're coming in hot.
Well, you
guess
know
what?
why?
You gotta be,
know why I'm coming in hot? Here's why I'm
Why?
coming in hot.
Yeah, tell me.
Because we just had some revolutionary discoveries with the person we're about to interview. And
that should
turns
make
out
you calm.
I knew her dad. And so I just got to talk to him, and now I'm amped. So get ready. We're going to talk about motherhood, and I'm all in, kids.
I think that's, yeah, you had to kind of get your space in, because this whole podcast is
because I'm pretty much going to be quiet the rest of the time.
I don't want you to be quiet. I really don't. I don't want you to be quiet. I want you to ask the questions, because I am so excited about this guest we have on the show today. Okay. Because Shannon K. Evans has written a book called ReWilding Motherhood. And when I saw her on Instagram talking about this, I don't know who maybe tagged me or how I found her, but maybe Hillary McBride. Did you do something with Hillary?
Yeah, she shared about it, and
that's it. Well, when I started digging in, I was like, before I even read the book, I knew I wanted Shannon on this show, because now that I've got the book in my hands, this is the content that I wanted 18 years ago. And it also feels like everything I've read so far, and I haven't completely finished the book, I could have written it. Like it's the same. It's like, there I am. It's like, I wish I would have had it, but here I am now at 43, having grown kids and an 11-year-old still coming up. Like, this is the stuff I'm practicing. And this is the stuff that motherhood's changed me for the better, to find who I am. And I think that what I'm recognizing is all of these themes that you talk about regarding discovering a new path of what feminine spirituality is. I just want to go there. I want to talk about all the things. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. That was a lovely introduction.
Well, okay. I want to know, Shannon, tell us a little bit where you're coming from today, a little bit about yourself. And then I want to ask you about even the name. What is ReWilding? So tell us about who you are and what is ReWilding.
Yeah, so for the last 6 years, I've been an Iowan, so found myself in the Midwest. I have 5 kids, 1 through adoption and 4 through my body, and I'm married to my husband, Eric, for 15 years. We have kind of been all over the map. We got married and spent 2 years as evangelical missionaries in Indonesia, came back and sort of randomly made our way into the Catholic Church. And so we've been Catholic now for like 7 years. But yeah, I grew up Protestant. So I kind of like to keep a foot in both worlds in some sense, and kind of find the synergy between those two traditions. And I am a writer, and my first book was Embracing Weakness, came out a couple of years ago. And then this one, ReWilding Motherhood, has been out for a month or 2 now. And as for the title, I was working with my marketing director, and I wanted something with the word wild in it, because my hope for the book was like that it would sort of be an invitation to kind of come back to this sort of like organic, primal, spirituality of motherhood that I think was really God's intention, and sort of we've lost that along the way. So I wanted like this wildness about it. And I came across the term rewilding, which was new to me, but is a term used among naturalists and environmental restoration practices, where they come in and they intentionally rewild a piece of land by removing all of the harmful human intervention and letting the land go back to doing what it's meant to do, and even reintroducing predators, reintroducing some native species, like things that may seem counterintuitive, but then like there are measurable ways to see that the ecosystem begins healing itself. From the outside, it looks more unkempt, it looks wild, but on the inside, it's thriving and doing exactly what it's meant to do, and it's healing itself. And so I just thought that was the most perfect metaphor for what I want motherhood to be for women, and what I believe it can be, sort of this path that leads us back to kind of this original state of self-awareness, self-knowledge, self-trust, where we can really thrive and where we can really find a relationship with God that is authentic to who we are inside, and not a matter of pleasing the people who are watching us or who are in authority over us or anything like that. But it's kind of coming back to this essence of you and God, and letting that restore your soul, you know, rehabilitate the ecosystem, if you will, of your being.
I loved everything. I loved everything about the introduction and what rewilding land looks like. We have a neighbor who is a environmentalist and rewilder, and we didn't know what was happening at first in their yard. We're like, oh my God, like, what are they doing here? You know,
they were the ugliest yard.
It's a terrible yard. I mean, just
you're ruining our neighborhood. Yeah.
But it's great. Once I found out, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. And it's native species, you know, native Texas species and things like that. But I think that what is so powerful about the concept of your book and what you're inviting us into is to not only let go of maybe external standards that history and culture dictate that mothers should be, but also to let go of some of the unhealthy tendencies that there are, for even the good can become too intoxicating when you're enmeshed in your children's lives, you know, to be this suffering saint or the martyr. And one of my favorite lines that you say right up at the beginning is, no one can bleed forever and hope to live.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's it. Can we put that on a bumper sticker? It needs to be the lesson. That's not God's intention. You know, is that part of just where this drive came from? Did you feel yourself in your own story bleeding out in a way?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I think I grew up in Christian culture and Christian spheres. And I think that influences a lot of how we see family life, especially for women, how we expect to function as a family system, what we expect out of motherhood. And there's a lot of glorification of sacrifice, and a lot of, I mean, the Mother's Day, having women stand and get their flowers and everybody claps. And it's just, you know, almost always the sermon of the day will be in praise of the sacrifice of what a mother gives. And it feels good, like, because it does require a ton of sacrifice, and like, it's nice to be validated for that. But it's a fine line between, you know, validating and kind of perpetuating this belief, this harmful belief that that's all women are good for, you know,
right.
That's the essence of your calling in the world. I think there's so much rhetoric around, you know, motherhood being your highest calling. And it's like, it's okay if you're bleeding out. It's okay if it costs you everything. It's okay if you lose yourself. And nobody's saying those words, but they're not, there's no triage, you know, like there's no help. And so that's kind of what I wanted to push back on, because for me, it became, I actually, one of my kids, the fourth one, the pregnancy was a surprise and it was really difficult for me. And, you know, I knew that I was going to have this baby, but it was very hard. And there was a lot of kind of dipping into a place of darkness and hopelessness and resentment, so much resentment, you know, of being stuck in this position. And yeah, so it was really been a process of the last few years of finding that the way to heal that wasn't just gritting my teeth and pressing in to the sacrifice and finding some sort of, you know, redemptive story in that place of martyrdom, but it was actually like listening to myself and what my needs were, and what my intuition was telling me was that I needed more balance in my life and I needed something else. So kind of learning how to honor those things and resisting the narrative that my highest worth is what I can offer and what I can lay down, and kind of being a doormat essentially.
So what do you do with just hearing you talk? I'm immediately envisioning one of those church services, probably on Mother's Day, where they're going to read Proverbs 31, and every well-intentioned man in the room is like, yeah, my wife's a Proverbs 31 wife. How does Proverbs 31 hit you in light of, I mean, is that a prescription for what you want to be? Is that I can't be that. So for you to say that that's what I am is almost not a badge of courage. It's almost, you're just pointing out my weaknesses, because I'm never going to be that. Like, how does Proverbs 31 hit you in light of all that?
Right. Well, you know, I've read a lot of helpful critique about that, and kind of the conversation of maybe the problem isn't actually that passage. Maybe the problem is what we do with that passage, or the parts of it that we pull out and highlight. Because there's actually some really interesting stuff there of, you know, she has her own business, you know, she has her own stream of income, she supports her family. And we don't really put a lot of weight on that part. We talk more about, you know, the parts that honestly are more pleasing to patriarchy. And
she gets up early, she makes her clothes, she cooks, she gardens.
Yes. And we're like, okay, but also like, it's pretty badass that there was a woman thousands of years ago has her own business and she's like hustling at the gate, selling her wares, you know? And so I think it's, for me, that's what I keep in balance. And when I hear stuff like that, I just sort of roll my eyes and forget it. Honestly, I don't really give it that much thought, but I know that, you know, culturally it really is in our subconscious a lot.
It is. And I think, I'm sure you've heard of Beth Barr and her work, Remaking of Biblical Womanhood.
Yes, I just did an event with her, actually, a virtual event. Awesome. You can find it on YouTube, but yeah.
So good. And when we talked about her book on the show, and it was so encouraging to know that, first of all of us we know come at our understanding of scripture and text with our own cultural bias. But what she really helped me to understand through her book was that the medieval woman, you know, motherhood was not this like highest calling, that women in that time period who were following after God were literally leaving their children to follow God. And that was their sacrifice, you know, to honor their truest calling, to honor who they believed they were. And it's not that they didn't love their kids, you know, it's that they were honoring the voice of God in their lives. And so I'm like, where did that get lost? You know, where did these prophets and these holy women, where did their voices get lost, you know?
Yeah,
and it's,
I love that. Yeah, I find it so interesting because, you know, when we look at the saints, you know, medieval or even after, the ones that we revere, they're almost never married with children, which I think is problematic. You know, I think there's like this glorification of one kind of vocation or one kind of calling. But it's really interesting because just what you're saying of like, well, clearly, you know, women were choosing their own spiritual path, their own soul over this, what we now say is kind of the end all be all for women. And so, yeah, it's like the women would actually choose like to go to a convent because they didn't want to get married, you know, because it was like these were their two options. You get, you know, you're given in marriage to somebody that you don't even know or you're not in love with, or you can have your personal freedom and join a convent. So it's very interesting to see how that unfolded. And I think really inspiring to see women throughout the Christian story of like Saint Clare, who was Saint Francis's best friend, essentially. She ran away from home in the middle of the night and shaved her head so that she could join Francis's guys. And I'm just like, we don't talk enough about these women, you know, more of these kind of stories.
So were they sweet on each other or just buddies?
No, just buddies, just kind of spiritual partners.
So what is, because the subtitle is Your Path, Rewilding Motherhood, Your Path to Empowered Feminine Spirituality. What is, the first time I heard this term was probably like 6 or 7 years ago. What is empowered feminine spirituality?
Yeah, so for me, can only kind of say my intentions with the book because people might use that term differently. But for me, I think, you know, my interest is really in helping women break down the harmful effects of living in a patriarchal society, living in a patriarchal church. And I'm not, Brett, I trust that you know this, but like, I am not at all like, you know, criticizing men or like hating men, anything like that. Like that's bull. No, I'm not doing that. But we can critique this system that has harmed women. And so, yeah, just kind of learning to re-engage the kind of spiritual path that is our own, that doesn't belong to institutional structures, that doesn't belong to male authority leaders or even female authority leaders for that matter, but that is our own. I think so many of our spiritual systems within Christianity, spiritual practices are really masculine in nature. And women historically have really found our connection to God being stronger in the earthen elements, in our children, in our elders, in the work of the home. And not at all that every woman needs to be at home 24/7, but the incarnational aspect of like flesh and matter and material world and air and trees and water and things like that. Like historically, that has kind of marked women who have a certain wildness within them, who have a certain inner freedom within them, whatever religious or spiritual tradition we might be talking about. And so kind of inviting that element of independence in a lot of ways, like spiritual independence that women can trust within themselves. So that was kind of a mouthful answer for you, but I don't have just one sentence to describe it, but hopefully that paints a picture.
It does. I think I told you about Sister Macrina and some of the silent retreats at St. Scholastica Monastery. And she was one of the ones who introduced what feminine spirituality meant. And really it was so interesting to me because I found her, and I can say this now. I know that she's with me now that she's passed away. And this won't be a threat to her standing in the monastery or the Catholic Church anymore, but she had a wildness about her. And even though she entered the monastery as a 17-year-old when she left home, throughout her life, she would talk about how even in this system of patriarchy in the Catholic Church, that there was so much richness and so much that the Catholic Church really had given feminine spirituality, with even understanding Mary and honoring Mary. And that is something, growing up as a Southern Baptist, we just thought was so crazy. We were just like, oh, Mother Mary, why are they praying to Mary? Why do we got to talk about Mary? Yeah. And, that was just my Baptist patriarchal lens. And so it was interesting to me. There was kind of this like little bit of a rebellion in the nuns, of like knowing that they possessed this understanding of God that was theirs, and that it wasn't it wasn't something that came as naturally for maybe the men to understand. Yeah.
I often say that I think the nuns are a big part of what keep me in the church, because they are really on the cutting edge of that. And I think there's such, they're not a monolith, but so many of them demonstrate this embodied feminine spirituality that says, I know what I know about God, and nobody can tell me different, and so they're just on the front lines of most of the justice work that's being done here and around the world. And just really kind of just a prophetic witness in such a male dominated church. And I just appreciate their presence so much.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah. The Mary thing was actually when my husband and I became Catholic, or a couple of years before. He had been kind of interested in a while, and he asked me, I say this in the book, he asked me if I would ever consider it. And I was like, no, I can't get past the Mary thing. And now, like, Mary is literally probably what keeps me in the church, because of that feminine representation. And I have a whole chapter on this in the book, but I think it really heals something in us to see a feminine body in our spiritual spaces, because we have images of Jesus everywhere. We have, crucifixes everywhere. We address God as Father and He traditionally, and we don't realize what that chips away at in a woman's psyche over the course of her life. And so to see this, to see the icons of Mary, or, the artistic renderings of Mary. And I enjoy,
exploring
throughout the course of history of like all the Black Madonnas of Europe, and
absolutely
just, like, Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico, like all of these different ways that she is embodied in different races and cultures. And I think there's something really necessary about that. Richard Rohr actually says that in the most like macho spaces, you will find Mary, because it's almost like the human consciousness is trying to balance itself out. So in a lot of like Latin American contexts that are very male dominated and very kind of macho, Mary is like a strong figure. And he talks about, like, at a lot of kind of cowboy type Southern Catholic churches that he's been to, Mary has a lot more prominence there than some of like the more moderate places. And so it's kind of interesting how the human psyche kind of seeks to balance itself out. But I think we need to help the process along a little bit.
That's so interesting. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, one of the things I wanted to ask you is why this book and why now?
Yeah. I think for me, I was definitely never planning to do a motherhood book. I was very much, it was really important to me to not be a women's writer because I had a lot of stuff about it. And then I kind of realized along the way that that's internalized patriarchy, that's saying it's not enough to be a women's writer. Like that's less than, it's less intellectual, it's less worthy of like academic pursuit and intellectual interest. And I was just like, well, I'm calling bullshit on myself here. So enough of that. And so, yeah, I think I kind of had a pretty transformative experience within the course of a couple of years of changing the way that I allowed myself to be in my family and in the world and even in the Catholic Church. And so it felt like an invitation to share some of what I was learning with other women. And so hopefully that came across in the book.
Will you share the story and the lore of what the midwife shared with you?
Yes.
Will you just tell that story to our listeners? I thought it was so powerful, and it is in essence what motherhood is.
Would you mind if I actually just read it?
Oh yeah, I got my book right here too. Let's see.
Okay. Well, you want to read it, or
I want you to. I would be honored if you would read it.
I'm afraid I will forget parts or whatnot if I try to do it off the top of my head.
Yes.
Okay. Are you ready?
I am. So set it up for us. So yeah, just.
So this is when I was pregnant with my first child. I went to a birthing center called Inanna Birth and Care. And I didn't think much of it, but the first time we had our intake appointment, my husband and I, and the midwife said, let me tell you about the story of Inanna. And it was clearly something that she told every woman who came in for her pregnancy care. So I was like, okay, I'll listen to the story. It's kind of random. And it's a Greek myth. And so I will, let's see, I'm trying to decide where to start. Okay, yeah, so I'll start with the actual story itself. But so the first epic poem, probably older than the Epic of Gilgamesh, is the idea, considered by some to be the first epic poem. So ancient story, and just rings so true. So here I go. In the story, Inanna descends to the underworld to visit her sister Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead, whose husband has just died. Naturally, the underworld is not a safe place to go, so Inanna is armed with divine powers to protect her. A crown, 2 necklaces, breastplate, ring, scepter, and fine clothes. When she arrives, her sister Ereshkigal is none too pleased and orders the 7 gates of the underworld bolted shut against Inanna. She is allowed through 1 gate at a time, but is required to strip herself of 1 divine power at each gate. So when Inanna finally meets her sister, she is naked and utterly vulnerable. Ereshkigal turns her defenseless sister into a corpse and hangs her on a hook, where Inanna stays for 3 days and 3 nights, until her faithful servant Ninshubar goes to the underworld with 2 demons, outsmarts Ereshkigal, and revives Inanna with the food and water of life. Inanna then rises from the dead and returns to earth. When the midwife finished the story, she looked me in the eye with all the tenderness of a wizened sage who knows their protege cannot yet possibly understand what they are about to say. This is childbirth, she said. You will be stripped of everything, for you can take nothing with you but what is inside you. You will die and you will be resurrected. You will know true things about yourself for the first time. And if you are paying attention, you can take that knowing with you into the rest of your life. This is the sacred mystery of motherhood, whether it has been entered into through childbirth, adoption, foster care, step parenting, or any other way. Motherhood does not tell us who we are. Motherhood tells us how to find out for ourselves. Oh, hallelujah.
I mean, like tears when I first read. I just thought, you don't take anything. What you have is what's inside of you. And every fear that arises at those gates, I mean, it's your fear. It's yours. And you have to contend with it, right?
Yeah.
And then what you know, you can never unknow.
Girl, yes. Not true. Yeah.
You know, and it does go with you. There is a knowing in that process of mothering that is both terrifying, exhilarating, and yet revealing. I mean, it's just like, it's just incredible. I loved that your midwife's like, let me tell you.
Isn't that amazing? I know.
And thank you for sharing that with the world. That is something the world needs to hear and needs to know. And that's something I think that every mom will be so refreshed and moved by as well.
Yeah.
As our hearts or bodies, both are broken open. It's amazing.
That I actually, I didn't necessarily forget, but I really hadn't thought about her telling me that story. And then when I started writing that chapter, it came to me and I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And honestly, it was like, this makes way more sense than it did when she first told me the story. Now I understand it in a really embodied way. And it really has kind of put me on this path of interest in mythology and fairy tale and folklore, in the way that it communicates something about ourselves in a similar way that the stories in scripture do. But I think for women, there's not a lot of female stories in scripture. There's a few, but there's not.
We gotta dig.
Right. There's not many that wear the lead role, at least. Right. That's for sure, And so kind of opening up this entire other canon of literature that can tell us things about ourselves through story, is really exciting to me. So I want to explore that more. Maybe
it's incredible. And all the biblical symbolism too of the 3 days, 3 nights. Anyway,
oh yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Hold on.
And then he feeds her with like the bread and water of life.
I know. Like, God's been around kind of a long time, guys.
Yeah. Right. Okay, Brett, we're interrupting you.
Y'all were the lead story in the Genesis story, okay? You're the lead actor in that. You are what brought this all down, okay?
Oh, is that it?
Remember that part?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
How can we complain about not getting the spotlight?
I know, you're at the very beginning.
That's right. Well, not really, but yeah, we took it down, didn't we? Okay, tell us.
Too.
Yes, you do. Tell us about the layout and just how you break down the book. I felt like that was really important.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So I put it into 2 parts. The first part is growing inward. I always get my words mixed up. Growing inward, and the second part is flowing outward.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't set out to do that initially, but as I was coming up with what I wanted to address in the chapters, it sort of seemed to organize itself in that some of the chapters were addressing things that were really only about what was going on inside of us. Mm-hmm. And then some of the chapters were addressing how we affect the world, how we affect our family and our...
Hold on. I think
mute
it's
your microphone.
I think it's dishwasher person. Hold on.
Oh my gosh.
Hold on.
Oh my gosh. Welcome to the zoo of our home.
podcast at my house. My dog does this.
Well, and we've been without a washer for going on a week now.
Oh no.
And let's just say it sucks.
Yeah.
And I can't fix anything. So hopefully this means it's going to get fixed and we can actually wash our clothes.
Yes, I hope so for you. Have you been having to go to the laundromat, or are you just waiting?
So each of us do our own clothes. And so I have opted. Do what?
Just FedEx.
Oh, it's just FedEx?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Washing
we all do
machine.
our own clothes. I've opted to wait. Emily is always on top of the laundry. Our middle daughter is horrific with laundry. So
Yeah, our
she
oldest is
waits
better.
until she gets in trouble. But Emily was gracious and actually washed my clothes the other day. So
I did. I was like, I haven't washed your clothes in years.
I don't know.
Okay, so let's go back.
Get us back to
the layout.
Oh, right. Okay.
Start over with the layout.
It's from the beginning.
Yeah, probably.
So yeah, I didn't necessarily start out trying to do a specific layout, but as I was kind of brainstorming and outlining what I wanted the chapters to be, I noticed that some of them were kind of organizing themselves around this idea of only what happens within us, kind of between us and God, or even between us and ourselves, our own psyches. And then other chapters really had a lot to do with not just what was going on within us, but how that affects the people that we interact with. So our children, our partners, our communities, and the world at large. And so I did the first half of the book is growing inward, and then the second half is flowing outward. And I felt like that was a way that we could kind of look at it in a holistic way. And I think there's a lot of books on, self-introspection, and there's a lot of books on, being active in the world or in the community. And so I kind of wanted to find a way to bring those things together into one work.
Talk a little bit about I think it's your very first chapter where you talk about also boundaries and that internal, external, there's internal boundaries that we make. There's external boundaries that are good and healthy for us. Why did you feel like it was so important, first of all, to write about boundaries when we're talking about motherhood? And why did you split them up into the internal and external?
Yeah, so one thing that I came across in a lot of my reading from therapists and counselors and psychologists was that boundaries actually enable us to be more generous people. And that really struck me because I think often we think the opposite is true, that the less boundaries we have, the more giving and generous and self-sacrificing we are. But in the reality, often we are doing that from a place of burnout and resentment and feeling like no one's grateful for what we're doing. And so it's not actually a very pure or healthy place to operate out of. And so establishing boundaries helps any human being become able to determine when they're able to give of themselves and their time and energy in a way that comes from a true place of inner freedom and generosity. Now, for moms, this is like exponentially true because there's a lot of giving and sacrifice that are not optional. We just have to,
Right.
Especially in the years when our kids are smaller. And then we kind of get in the habit, and some of us continue doing it even when they're teenagers or adults. And so I think for a book on motherhood, I saw it as really important to address that because it is part of a healthy spiritual life. It's not at all separate from spirituality. It doesn't make you a worse Christian because you put up boundaries. It actually helps your spiritual practice become more generous. And so the internal and external thing, I wanted to highlight because internal boundaries only have to do with ourself. It's kind of deals that we make with ourselves of like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to drink alcohol at all because I can't seem to handle it. And I list several other ones. I'm not going to do screen time this time of day or on the weekends or whatnot. And then external boundaries are ones that we have to make with the people in our lives, at work or in the home or at church or things like that, that kind of say, I think Brene Brown says, like, a boundary is saying, this is what's okay and this is what's not okay. And I think having that clarity is really important if we're going to live a healthy life.
It is. And I also just feel like it's so tempting because maybe the standard of what the world says around us, or culture of what women or what mothers are to be, it's so easy to let those boundaries go. And it's called good.
Mm-hmm.
You're affirmed for not having boundaries.
Yes.
It's honorable in some ways to spin yourself, ragged. But I think our children and our families are the mirrors that say, like, sometimes Brett's just like, you need to take a nap, or just, I got the kitchen, like, yeah. quit spinning, quit. You don't have to, you think you do, but you don't. And so it's just so helpful. I think if we really can listen to even what our community is saying about those who see us most, are saying about our character sometimes, like, they can be cues to us to maybe draw some better boundaries.
Right.
You also talk, which leads me into talking about anger. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of understanding anger, what it is, what it isn't, why it was important to write on that.
Yeah. I don't think it's talked about enough in women's literature and women's offerings. I think it's something that usually when it comes up, it's sort of from a place of shame or having done something wrong, or something that you're trying to pray your way out of like, I feel terrible. I got angry with my kids. I need to be less angry, or just like this feeling of guilt about it. And so I'm an Enneagram 9, which is sort of like plagued by this anger that is always just simmering under the surface that we never let out. And then I have an 8 wing, which is just like, that means you're going to hear my anger sometimes, Yeah. But like, so for me, it's been a huge part of my journey of like in spiritual direction and inner work of like learning to befriend that anger and not seeing it as a threat and not seeing it as something to avoid or repress. And I think that that's so true of women of all personality types, because, well, there's a lot of, I talk about it in my book about a lot of the reasons why I believe that it's not safe for women to really feel our anger. But we have to create a safe place to be able to do that for ourselves. Like if our church doesn't do it, if our social structure doesn't do it for us, we have to find that sense of safety to be honest about our anger with ourselves. And that doesn't mean permission to fly off the handle at all times or be hurtful or anything like that, but to be honest and not call it frustration, not call it disappointment, not say we're fine if we're not, like naming it. Yes, I'm mad. Yes, I'm angry. And then asking questions about what it's trying to teach us.
Absolutely.
About ourselves. And it's almost never the situation that just happened, like, sure, that's a piece of it, but it's always, you have to just keep tracing it back and keep asking questions to find the root of it instead of, the symptom. That was a mixed metaphor, but
Yeah, it's I have a very close relationship with anger. All 3 of us do here. We've got the 8, 9, and 1 triad on the podcast today.
I am resolved on that.
You have no anger. And I think my work with anger has led me, the 9 and the 1 just have that quiet tendency to hold anger, and the way it comes out is in different ways. Mine's probably a little bit stronger and more straightforward than yours sometimes, but it is there nonetheless. And it has led me to deep grief. Like one of my Allender Center, I don't know if you know the Allender Center, but they're amazing, and they do narrative story work and trauma informed narrative story work. And so one of the things that one of my story guides said to me is that, you know, Emily, how they said, can you remember like the first time you were really, really mad about something, or that you were even holding on to it? You may not could express it, but you were mad. And, you know, so we went into that story, and she just said, I just see that as being part of your God-given desire for justice. Anger's there because something's wrong.
Right.
Anger's there because something's off or broken. And so the more you can start treating even your anger with kindness, it allows you to hold it and hold the tension of it, that we may not can fix this overnight.
Yeah.
This might have to be cried over for a long time, to which I was like, oh, like who wants to hear that?
Yeah,
I'd rather just get pissed, you know?
Yeah.
But wow, like what an invitation anger is to our own stories and to the stories for women of great harm.
Yeah.
And great injustice, maybe even longing and dissatisfaction with where you're at in your parenting, in your home, in your family of origin, whatever it is in the world. It's such an important topic. And I'm so thankful that you wove that into the embodied feminine spirituality, because it is a part of who we are.
Yeah. And you know, that is probably the chapter that I get the most feedback on, that people really appreciate the most. And even people who don't really like the rest of the book. There are some women who are more conservative than I am who are like uncomfortable with parts of the book. And, you know, that's fine. Not every book is for every person. But I have noticed and been surprised that even many of them say this chapter was kind of worth reading the book, or you know, I was like, that indicates something. Like we are all so hungry for someone to tell us what to do with this anger, and what and how to what to do with it. Because I think, you know, the message is that we're not supposed to experience it. But just like you said, it's often trying to lead us to changes that we're invited to make, that we have agency to actually make, or, you know, activism to get involved in, you know, to things that make us angry in the world. We can do something about these things, you know. And so, and then sometimes, like you said, it's really just an invitation to face your grief and cry, and like you really need to deal with those, you know, the tears that have to come. So I'm learning to make friends with my anger and be grateful for it, because it's teaching me a lot and helping me. Yeah. It's
such a cue. To the mothers who might be tuning in, and maybe you're carpooling or giving, I don't know how you listen to your podcast, but maybe you're in the midst of dinner preparation, or you're having your alone time. I just wondered if Shannon could give us just a guided meditation to kind of help us ground ourselves into this idea of not only motherhood, but what it means to be our own person who may be mothering in our lives right now. And so Shannon does this a lot. And at the end of each chapter of her book, Shannon has kind of a going deeper practice that you can do, which is really, really helpful. And I was able to read and practice one this morning, and it was so beautiful. Really intentional questions. So I'm great if you want to do one from the book, or if you just want to freestyle it. I will remind our listeners, if you're driving, don't close your eyes. You know, don't do that unless you are driving.
Do you really have to remind people to do that?
I have caught myself during like a yoga podcast, and I started to close my eyes because it was just like habit.
Okay, we need to talk when this is over.
Well, I mean, I just dissociate maybe in like a different world. I don't know. I was like transported and I was like, wait.
Right.
So,
If you can, pull over.
yeah, if you
over.
can pull over.
Yes, I would love to. Yeah, I think I'm just going to freestyle it.
It's great.
So if it's available to you, get your feet flat on the floor and kind of sit up straight so that you're in an active posture of receiving, and feel the ground beneath your feet. And just take a minute to be grateful for that stability. Be grateful that you can find solid ground wherever you are, however upside down your world is feeling, however chaotic your day feels, you can stop and find solid ground beneath you. If you're comfortable with it, open your hands, palms up, in a posture of receptivity, just a way to physically invite the Spirit of God to come and bring peace, bring steadiness. And we're going to just breathe. Just notice your breath. You can inhale for 4 counts, exhale 5 counts. Kind of move some of that stale air through your body. You can use your nose or your mouth, whichever one feels right to you. We're going to just take those deep breaths a few times. Place one hand on your heart, one hand on your stomach. And continue your slow breathing. And notice how your heart rate might slow down just a bit. Notice how slowing your breath can help you relax your jaw. Breathing is such a powerful tool that we have to bring ourselves back to center and to control the overwhelm that hits us. As you continue your deep breathing, remembering to exhale just a little longer than you inhale. Choose a word or a phrase that you might feel called to today. An intention. Maybe something like, I am fully present. Maybe I can trust myself. Maybe God's Spirit is inside me. Maybe I am enough. Continue that slow breathing and notice the way that your palms feel against your body, one over your heart and one on your stomach. Just take a minute of gratitude that your body helps you experience the world, helps you experience love and relationship, helps you experience connection to the divine, connection to the earth. Just tell your body thank you. And then continue your mantra, whichever one you've chosen, the phrase that you need to say to yourself today, over and over, and just say it as you breathe in and out. My prayer for you is that you would find your wildness and you would trust it to lead you back to yourself, to the place inside of you that knows God intimately, that your wildness would point you home and set you free. Last breath in and out. Thank you.
I feel so much better.
Me too.
I love
Fell
it. That's how much
But I was breathing.
rest.
I was breathing, baby.
You were
That's
breathing.
it.
It's amazing how I can feel my heart rate kind of slow down. You know,
Mhm. You don't even know what you're holding.
right?
Sometimes I literally felt my jaw just even when you were before you said it, and then when you named it, I was like, oh my gosh, my jaw just relaxed.
Yeah, cool. I love
Yeah.
that.
It's
Yeah.
so great. Well, Shannon, I am so excited to get this book out in the world. And I actually have a giveaway copy for those who listen to the podcast. So once we post this podcast, if you, we'll tell you how to get your free copy. And so we are so excited to give this away and get it out in the world. You have done a good work.
Thank you, sis. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's lovely to connect with you and tell everyone where they can find you. And
Yeah.
what do you have anything coming up that people can be
Let's
involved
see.
in?
Yeah, I do. Well, I have, does this run before Advent or
Mhm.
during? Okay, so I'm doing these weekly Advent reflections via email, and you can find me on Substack. It's not up on my website yet. My website is shannonkevans.com, and on Instagram I'm shannonkevans at shannonkevans, no.com there. But I'll be sharing a lot about how to sign up for the Advent reflection emails, and they're kind of centering seeing the Christmas story through the eyes of Mary's motherhood. So I think it's pretty relevant, trying to tie it into this book, and I think it'll be a pretty spiritually nourishing thing. They'll be short, written reflections, and I'm hoping to also have an audio option for people who like to listen.
Wonderful. I love it. Well, thanks for coming to the Jesus Said Love podcast. We are grateful, and we just bless the work that you continue to do.
Thank you so much.
Good stuff. Yeah. Okay.